Shape of My Heart. Dominic Miller and Sting wrote this track, and I absolutely love this chord progression. Juice WRLD loved this chord progression as well, which is why he sampled it in his song Lucid Dreams. Now, sampling requires that you get clearance. He did not, and he got sued. In any case, this song is in the key of F sharp minor. The chord progression is F sharp minor, E major 6, B minor over D, C sharp 7 sus4, resolving to C sharp 7, and it repeats. But instead of repeating back to F sharp minor, it repeats to D over F sharp. Similar chords, but not the same chord. That might seem confusing. It is a little confusing. Basically, F sharp minor, E, B minor, C sharp, major, 5 major. In the key of F sharp, 5 should be minor, but it's major, or dominant 7. This is a common thing in Latin jazz, that 1 minor to 5 major thing, or in this case, it's a minor chord progression and 5 is major. So common in Latin jazz. Dominic Miller is an Argentinian guitarist and producer who is phenomenal, in case you don't know. You don't happen upon this kind of thing. You write this kind of thing when you know what you're doing. But what can we learn from it? Let's see. This chord progression is 1 minor, flat 7, major, diatonic so far. B minor is 4 minor, and then 5 major, which is non-diatonic, but common in Latin jazz. On the repeat, it goes to D, first inversion D, D over F sharp. D would be flat 6. So this is all like pretty standard stuff, but it doesn't sound or look, the song doesn't sound basic. When you see him play it with these spidery voicings, it doesn't look basic, but fundamentally, like the building blocks are pretty standard. So what makes it so cool and interesting? It's not one thing. The next section is D major 6. A, 5, just a really difficult looking power chord, to A sus2, back to A5. Then the chords go C sharp major, D major. You could call that penultimate chord G sharp minor 11, or if you didn't want to say that this is 2 resolving to 1, you could say that it is C sharp dominant 7 sus4 over G sharp. Whew. That's too many syllables. How many is that? C sharp 7 sus4 over G sharp. 9 syllables? You should not be playing 9 syllable chords. Whatever, sounds good. So you got to pass, Dominic Miller. So are you calling that C sharp dominant 7 sus4 over G sharp? Whew. Or are you just calling that G sharp minor 11? He plays the whole like 5 dominant 7 sus thing earlier in the song, and as far as like functional harmony goes, saying 5 to 1, even though it's an inversion with a bunch of weird shit on it, that just kind of makes more sense for me. But you know, when you play the chord, you may connect that as like an obvious minor 11 chord, if minor 11 chords are obvious to you, in which case you probably don't need me to explain this to you. Anyway, I love this chord progression. There's so much going on here that is compelling and interesting and worth talking about in a YouTube video. Takeaways. The takeaways might be the building blocks. Like fundamentally, this is not that confusing or not that complex. It's just a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that. And how about we do this? And all together it sounds really beautiful and sophisticated, but it's not alienating. Picasso said famously, learn the rules like a master so that you can break them like an artist. And this reminds me of that quote. Anyway, so we have a simple-ish chord progression with a lot of sophisticated sounding voicings, like spread voicings or drop voicings. You have nice voice leading, which is really the reason that we do these spread voicings a lot of time, is for the voice leading. There's something about that that's really pleasing when we're not just jumping around from like root position chord, but we're playing them close to one another. And you can only do that by playing inversions. What else can we learn from this? The casual listener would think that this 4-bar phrase repeats. It sounds like it does, but the first chord is different. That's interesting. Subtle difference there, because you can, because you're hearing it. I don't know why I did it, but it's nice. A 4-bar phrase that repeats, Usually it's the last bar that changes and then it takes you into the next section, but the first bar changes. So that's one of many layers to this. So you've got standard chord progression with a non-diatonic chord, then you have these spidery voicings to result in voice leading. And then you have a repeat, but the first chord is different. That's 5, what if we do this, elements so far. And there's more. The song ultimately modulates to the key of C sharp minor, which is clever, if not textbook. You know, typically your modulations would be a direct modulation, which is kind of boring, just goes up a half step. The most standard modulation would be to go up a third, major third or minor third. This one is clever because it doesn't require like any setting up of the chord progression because of that penultimate chord, that C sharp dominant 7 sus4 over G sharp. That's 5 going to F sharp, cool. But if you call that G sharp and then you call that 5, then it modulates to C sharp really nicely. So the ambiguity around that chord sets up later a modulation that works really well. You know, you have a special chord progression when you can listen to it just endlessly. The song ultimately changes, and it just changes by doing the same thing up a fifth. And it modulates up a fifth just by reinterpreting that penultimate chord, that 5 chord, as 5 of a new key. You know, you notice that when a chord has a crazy name, like a 9-syllable name, there are different ways to interpret it. So the crazier the chord, the more naming options you have. If it's just a D chord, okay, D, F sharp, A, fine. You know, you don't have to analyze that any other way, unless the context is really like demanding it. You don't have to have a crazy chord progression to get something that sounds really sophisticated and beautiful and sweet and evocative. You can add these little goodies here and there. What if we do spread voicings? What if we have a non-diatonic chord? What if we, on the repeat, change something subtly? What if we modulate it? What if we have chords with tensions on them, like D major 6 or G sharp minor 11, sus4 chords? Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about this, if you have any suggestions for songs you would like me to unpack in this way, and if it resonates with me or if enough of you tell me to do it, I will do it. Have a good one.